From Super League to Olympic distance to age group world records to Kona. Go longer with the right fuel at the right time with SFuels.
This is a phenomenal bike ride, and I can tell you he's so casual. This is his first time he's ever biked the full 112 miles here in Hawaii. He's never been up to the turn in Harvey. He's certainly been up there today. Doesn't he look...
It's breakfast with Bob.
And Poncho Man, everyone. Welcome to our 11th year of Breakfast with Bob from beautiful Huggos on the Rocks. My name is Bob Babbitt. We're brought to you by Master Spas, SFuels Go Longer, HOKA Let's Fly, Form Smart Swim Goggles, Quintanaroo Zoot, the original triathlon brand, and our Challenged Athletes Foundation. Our next guest, three-time ITU World Champion, 1995 Ironman World Champion. Give it up for Karen Smyers. Hey, Karen, how you doing?
Hey, Bob. It's great to be here.
Can you believe the crowds here? Normally, this is like early in the week for Ironman when everything's on Saturday, but not anymore.
Yeah, I just got in last night, and I feel like I almost missed everything already. It got started very early this year.
Very early. So for you, you never really thought about doing Ironman early on, right? You were doing Olympic distance, and at that point, the Ironman, the triathlon wasn't in the Olympics yet, right?
That's right.
It was just happening. So what got you to go longer distance?
So actually, yeah, I used to tell people, but Ironman, that's for crazy people.
It really is.
I never realized that I was going to become a crazy person, but it happened because both my husband and my sister, Donna, they decided that they wanted to go. And I was like, well, if you guys are going to go, I'm not going to go on the sidelines, And there was a qualifier in our Boston area that a whole bunch of people from my club, Team Psycho, all tried to qualify, including my husband. I wasn't eligible because I was a pro, but it was for age groupers.
Right.
And a whole bunch of them qualified, including my sister and my husband. And so then I was
now
like,
you got to go.
Yeah, I'm like, I better find a place to qualify and take up this long distance stuff.
Now, so as a pro, did you have to qualify back then?
It was a little bit more...
invitational?
Yeah.
Well, because I know Natasha Bodman was invited, Luke Van Leeuwen was invited.
David Yates was in charge back then. And Dave McGilvery was my agent, and he called Dave and said, and Mike Pigg also wanted to get a qualifying spot. And he called up Dave and said, hey, where can Mike and Karen qualify? And he's like, I'll put up a couple spots at the Chicago Olympic distance. They're both racing there, right? And I'm like, yep. And so he put 2 spots up at an Olympic distance race, and Mike and I both got our spots there. It was a lot easier than having to, run around the world doing Ironman races to qualify.
Yeah, but at the same time, it still meant you had to come and do a real... Now, was that 93?
That was 93.
93, so the first time you came here.
Yeah.
And that'd be a little shock to the system doing something, because I'm imagining you probably didn't go 112-mile bike rides and things like that, or run a marathon leading in.
I think I might have. I remember doing my first century ride ever, and that was that summer, getting ready for it. And my husband and I did it together with a few other people, and I remember finishing that 100-mile bike ride and like crawling into my house, laying down on the living room floor and going, oh my God, how are we ever going to run a marathon, And that was only 100. We haven't even done 112,
Right.
And, but, the next week that we rode long, it got a little easier. We're like, okay, just try and run 2 miles afterwards and see how it feels. And the thought of it is almost worse than the doing. Once you get started, it's just like you start getting used to the fatigue. And, so it was just, I learned how to do it like everybody else, just one step at a time.
And then I think it was at 94 where you got 4th?
So 93 I was 4th.
Okay.
Yeah. And then 92, the next year, 94, I was 2nd.
Okay. That's right. So 90 you're 2nd that year. And so now, I mean, once you're on the podium, there's really no reason to be looking up at anybody.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, even on the year that I got 4th, I was like, okay, that was... kind of winging it. Now I know what it's all about. And, I got to see how Paula races it. And I was like, wow.
That's in a different world.
Yeah. So, but it started giving me, more of an idea of what to shoot for. And, once I'd done it once, I was like, I have to go back every year. This is pretty cool.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
And so 95, leading into that race, was going to be very special. Mark Allen was coming back. He'd already announced his retirement. This was going to be his last race. I think Paula announced that she was going to retire. It was all about... Paula's going to come. She's going to win her 8th, and she's going to retire And, oh, by the way, there's other people in the race.
Yeah, there was. She definitely caught a lot of attention.
Yeah.
But yes, I like to take credit for the fact that we got another year out of Paula.
We did. You got her to come back for another year. So during that race, Paula was doing her thing. She was out in the stratosphere on the bike, and you were getting splits. I know you're thinking, listen, if Paula stays out there by herself, the women will get no coverage, right?
Yeah, I definitely, going into the race, I'm like, I don't know if I can beat her, but I'd like to make it close enough that the women's race is interesting,
right?
Because they'd covered her so many times, winning that they were like, okay, let's find something new, and so they would end up going to the men's race. Of course, Mark Allen had won a lot too, so they'd done a lot on him as well. But his races were often a little bit closer because he would come from behind on the run, whereas Paula often took off on the bike.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, it was in my head, and I'd raced Paula enough at shorter distance, and I felt like I can bike with her at the shorter distance. I can even sometimes beat her. And I'm like, it must be experience that makes her so much better. But, clearly it was more than that. So at the beginning of the bike, I was like, all right, just stay with her, because I swam with her, biked with her the first 25 miles. It was mostly when we hit the winds that I felt like I was doing an Olympic distance race to stay with her at that point. And I'm like, I can't keep this up, and she just started to take off. Yeah. And so then I was the one that kept getting these splits, because it's a lot easier for the person behind to get the splits, right? So it was just, you're a minute back. I'm like, yeah, I can see her. And then it's like, you're 2 minutes back. I'm like, yeah, rub it in. And then 4 minutes back, 8 minutes, it's
right. And you're like, I don't really need to know anymore.
Yeah.
And what was it at the end of the bike?
The end of the bike, it was 12. Yeah.
So 12 minutes at that point, and you're obviously an exceptional runner. And anything can happen. We've all seen that. When you took off on the run, what were you thinking?
I'd say to her, in the middle of the bike ride there, I was not thinking good thoughts at all.
Yeah.
But I eventually kind of pulled it together and, starting the run, just said, have a good run. Just do the best you can. Yes, it was almost, she was so far ahead that it was almost out of sight, out of mind, except I did have in my head, if you run 30 seconds a mile faster than her, that's not that big of a difference, and I'll catch her with a couple miles to go. That's 24 miles.
And that keeps you going.
Yeah, and so then I did start getting splits that I was catching up 30 seconds a mile. For the first 8 miles, I made up 4 minutes. So I'm like, well, that's encouraging,
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
And now, was the energy lab part of the race?
Yep.
Okay. So at that point, you get to see her.
Yes.
How did she look?
She still looked like she was really far ahead, but and when you're going to see your competition, you definitely kind of pull it together, right?
Right.
So I didn't get a whole lot of information. It was more heading back after the energy lab that people started telling me, she doesn't look good, you look much better, you're doing great, don't give up, keep going, that kind of thing.
And that pumps you up.
It does. At the same time, I was like, but she's so far ahead still. It was like I was getting close, but at least that made me feel like, okay, it's interesting for television.
Right, now they can
it's
send
not
the
a
chopper
given.
back.
Yeah, exactly.
They can send the chopper back and go, oh, this looks pretty close. It's 4 minutes. It's 5 minutes, and you're making up ground. So at least you got a show.
Given that it used to be 12, at least that seems closer. Yeah.
Something to talk about.
Yeah.
So as you're coming into town and you're going to be dropping down Palani, you still hadn't seen her, obviously.
Right.
And what are you hearing from the side of the road? Oh, my God, she stopped the walk.
So the couple of things that I remember was at the top of Palani, someone telling me it was a minute 40. And I was like, well, that's close, but she can hear the finish line from here. And I just figured that was going to bring her in. I'm like, but that's still pretty cool that I've gotten this close, and I'll try and get even closer, Yes. So I ran down Palani, feeling like I was flying, but I'm sure I wasn't. Just before the hot corner, when I could see the hot corner, and I could see the helicopter, so I knew I was getting closer, right? I finally got a glimpse of her just as she turned down Hualalai, and then she kind of disappeared from sight. But when that happened, it was like the coolest moment, because I was like, oh my God, she's right there. It's no longer this illusory, thing that I'm chasing. And so that was sort of a moment that really sticks out. And so when I came around the corner, my eyes were like, where is she? Where is she? And she was running down Hualalai.
Barely running.
But barely, right. And then as I was like, oh my God, go for it. As I was running down, she all of a sudden stopped almost right in front of me. And I didn't have time to assess what was happening. I just thought she might be cramping.
Right.
People had told me she didn't look good, but I had no idea until I saw the TV coverage later how bad shape she was in.
So you basically almost kept her from falling down.
Yeah,
She was like a fighter who was about to
she
go
was
down.
a little bit of a
Wobbly.
staggered into my path, and I kind of stepped around her, hit the back of her, and said, "Nice job, Paula," and then just ran.
Yeah, well, because you don't know.
Yeah,
she
I
can see you
didn't
go
know.
by.
Yeah.
And
I
come
thought
through.
if she's cramping, she might feel better, and then all of a sudden,
And as a runner, you don't look back.
Right. Yeah.
So then you turn on to Elite Drive.
Yeah.
And you don't. It's not like you're savoring anything at this point because you
no.
don't know.
I'm like, she's right
She
there.
could be right behind you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then as you're coming in.
I did look back one time.
And you saw
I was
nobody
like,
there.
I got to know. Like, did she come back?
Yeah.
And I didn't see her. And so then that made me think, gosh, I wonder what happened. But then I was like, and they were kind of announcing, here comes Paula Newby-Fraser. This is before cell phones and all that,
Right.
so they had no idea there'd been a little change of plans there. So then they finally realized, like, oh, wait, that's not Paula. That's Karen.
That's
and
a
so,
big Nike swoosh across the middle.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I didn't have time to concoct a, cool finishing, like,
Right.
photo or anything. I was just like, oh my God, the finish line's here. What have I just done?
That is so cool.
Yeah.
And so when you win that, obviously you've been in the sport for a long time. How did that change things for you now that you won really the most important event? Because at that point, there was no Olympics yet. It's the most important event in the sport, and you just won it.
Yeah. It's funny. I remember when I won my first ITU Worlds, I flew back home with, there was a reporter from the Herald with us, who's a good friend of ours, actually. And we used to hang out at a place called the Elliott Lounge. And when we went back, we were like, let's go for a beer at the Elliott to sort of, celebrate. And so my husband and I went in, and Steve came with us, the guy from the Herald. And we were sitting at the bar, and, a few of the bartenders that we know were there, a few other locals that, and so we're just chatting away. And Steve, all of a sudden, he goes, yesterday you were champion of the world. Today you're just a Mike King's girlfriend at the bar of the Elliott. And I was like, yeah, not a lot's changed, Whereas I have to say, after I won Hawaii, it was a big enough thing that, people outside the sport knew of it. My local paper, the Globe, like it was a much bigger deal, and things did change a little bit. Yeah.
When you come back here and see how fast the women are going now, and how just across the board, swim, bike, and run.
Yeah, everything.
What are your thoughts?
The bike ride. I mean, I just don't know how they go so fast. It's incredible. So many women going under 5 hours, like by a lot.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, Danielle Reef taught that a few years ago when she did that second half of the ride. Oh, my God. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
And it's fun.
And then the runs too, like seeing them breaking, like low 250s.
If you went anywhere near, you go 303, 304. That was a big deal.
When I ran 305, it was the second fastest time ever. I think Aaron had run 304.
Yes.
And then
I think Lori Bowden.
And then in '99, I got passed by Lori.
Who
I
ran
finished second that year,
right?
and she broke
first person
three.
to break
yeah,
three.
and I was sort of proud of the fact that at least to get beaten, someone had to break the record.
Absolutely. That is so cool.
So, but it's fun. It's fun watching them get faster, actually.
When you watched triathlon go into the Olympics, because that was your distance, was that hard? Because that, if it happens 4 years earlier, you're probably on the US
tried
team.
to make it in 2000. I went to Olympic trials.
That's right.
I definitely had a
You
shot
went
at
up.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was fun to be in the, at least.
Oh, so you were
in
there
the
in Dallas at the
conversation.
trials. That's
I was,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
My swimming, I had just. Swimming had changed. It became with
well,
the draft
Barbara
legal.
Lindquist, Sheila Dormina.
Yeah,
you got
they
some
really were taking
uber
it out
swimmers.
from the front, and I had both the broken collarbone and a separated shoulder in the lead up, and swim just did not come around in time. I think I needed to just take the swim much more seriously than I did. I lived off my college swimming for so long, and I think that
Came
was
back to bite you.
exactly. It was just
So we have women racing on Thursday, men on Saturday. Do you like that? Separate races?
Well, I love the idea of it. I love the idea of the women having their own day, getting, all the press coverage, and having, even on the amateur side, less men gumming up the works. I think it's going to be a much fairer race, but I'm a little nervous about the toll on us watching and the volunteers and the island infrastructure. Yeah. So I hope it works because I think it's really cool. But I'm like thinking, how am I going to do 2 full days of Ironman spectating in 3 days? Because it's exhausting.
It is exhausting.
Yeah, but
Karen, always such a treat. Thank you
so
so much for
nice to be here, Bob. Thank you for inviting me.
Joining us. Poncho Man, wherever you are, come take us out. Karen Smyers, everybody.
It's breakfast with Bob.
And Poncho Man, everybody. everybody.